8 seconds. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone joining us today. So it's been a brilliant day. We've hosted 2 sessions already this morning. This is the third of a series that we created, and I'm really thrilled, to have Francesca Hopwood-Road moderating this, and the panel who are going to introduce themselves shortly. Such a diverse and really highly experienced and relevant panel to this topic. So the 2 previous sessions were around, 2 big topics, ESG and RegTech adoption with a focus on financial crime. And with both of those, it was a question of what's the gap, what's going well versus less well, but what can we do, what needs to be done about this, and pointing towards collaboration, because these topics are so huge that it's not for any one bank or regulator or regulated firm to do alone. So, collaboration is talked about a lot, but let's get into the nitty gritty, because I think, more needs to be done. But Francesca, I'm going to hand over to you to unpack this for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, and welcome everybody to what promises to be a really fascinating discussion on, as Sarah said, the need for collaboration across the whole ecosystem. I'm Francesca Hopwood-Road. I head the Bank for International Settlements Innovation Hub's London Centre, where one of our focuses, amongst others, is on RegTech and SupTech. And prior to that, I was the head of RegTech and Advanced Analytics at the UK's Financial Conduct Authority. So this is an issue very close to my heart. Please join me in welcoming my wonderful panel for this discussion, Cyril Okoridwe, Alan Blanchard and Angus Moyer, and we'll shortly be joined, I hope, by Linda Jeng as well. Before I ask the panel to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation, just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. As with all good panel discussions, it's the quality of the interaction, it's the engagement. So please do share your questions for the panel in the chat. I will aim to leave a good 10 minutes for Q&A at the end, and I will prompt you throughout the discussion to add in your questions. But please take this as an invitation to put your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them as best we can. I can see that Linda has joined. Welcome, Linda. Perhaps actually, Linda, I could come to you first to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Sorry, my Google Chrome did not like air meat. So I think that good old Firefox will do the trick today. Everyone, I am Linda Jeng. It's very nice to meet you all. I am currently the Chief Policy and Regulatory Officer of the Center Consortium, which is the standards organization for the stablecoin USDC. I'm also the visiting scholar of financial technology at Georgetown Law, where I study DeFi, open banking, and digital assets. And prior to both roles, I was at the Federal Reserve Board, the Financial Stability Board, as well as a number of U.S. agencies, including Treasury and the Senate. So I'm very happy to be here. I think I'm probably one of a couple of speakers here who has experience in both the government side and the private sector startup world. And I'm excited to talk about our work together.
Thank you very much, Linda. Cyril, perhaps I can come to you next.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and very warm thank you to the organizers of this event, Sarah and Mona, for the good job. We strongly believe that these are the kind of initiatives that are very, very healthy for driving the kind of change that the entire industry is demanding for. My name is Cyril Okorigwe. I'm the CEO of RegTech Africa. RegTech Africa is a tech media company with a niche focus on innovative regulation as a force for common good. And we actually are on a mission to ensure that through ecosystem building, we're able to get the conversation going around increasing the adoption of RegTech. And we also are on a unique mission to enhance regulatory and financial standards, promote innovative excellence, and create reliable value, thereby changing the narratives on the application of and impacts of regulation on new and disruptive innovative technologies across Africa and beyond. We achieve this through industry-focused thought leadership series, ecosystem-driven collaboration, data-driven content creation and distribution, and risk-based research and development services across the RegTech landscape. I'm very happy to be on this panel discussion, and I look forward to learning a great deal from the very well-qualified panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyril. Alan.
Thanks, Francesca. Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Blanchard. I am working for APX, which is a Swiss RegTech firm. So founded in Zurich in 2017, and I joined in 2019 to help them as kind of boots on the ground here in the UK. Before that, I was at the FCA, also the UK regulator, where I was certainly working with Angus alongside many others on the looking at how we can turn the handbook of rules into machine readable code so that we can come up with some sort of automatic compliance solution. My move to APX was to actually deliver this more quickly. Sorry about that. But we are working on APX. The concept that we've termed for this is embedded compliance. So how can we take all of the complexities of compliance and just digitize that so that it's embedded directly into any business system or process so that that can be done compliantly with hopefully no further ado. So that's me.
Thank you. And last but by no means least, Angus.
Thank you very much. So I'm Angus. I lead the bank's work on transforming data collection. For those of you who don't know, this is a really big, high-profile program that we're running in conjunction with the FCA that is primarily about collaboration, particularly collaboration with industry. Why does this program exist? Because industry complained that regulatory reporting and reporting in general is pretty expensive, and one consultant thinks it's somewhere between £2 to £4.5 billion a year for the UK financial sector to send us data. That's us and the FCA. And then when they spend all that money in that time, we spend lots of time complaining that the data quality is not what we want. Nor do we seem to ever seem to have the data we quite need for whatever is the latest crisis that's happening. So that's kind of my primary role. I also, as Alan said, I've been working in the kind of data collection and innovation space for a while. And yeah, collaboration is very much a topic very close to my heart.
Thank you very much, Angus. And I think for all of our audience, you will agree that we have such a panel with such diverse geographical perspectives, public sector, private sector perspectives, and not least a considerable pedigree, a history in what is a relatively useful field of activity. So I know that this conversation is going to be a really interesting one. So if I can leap straight in, the title of the panel assumes that there is currently in either the quality or breadth of collaboration a gap. Can I start by asking each of you for your opening reflections on the state of collaboration in the RegTech ecosystem? And Linda, if I can come to you first.
So I think it depends on which perspective you have. Are you holding on to the trunk of the elephant or to the tail of the elephant? So when I was at the Fed, we spent a lot of time looking at, how can we leverage these technologies so it could enhance our supervision. And, as with most bank supervisors, you have access to a huge amount of data from the banks as well as communications, and it is just simply too much to sift through. And so you often have really a problem between structured data and unstructured data. And with structured data, I think most regulators have a pretty good sense of what to do with that, and especially since it's the regulators who have designed the reporting forms. But it's the unstructured data that's highly problematic for regulators. And we were always trying to see, can we use MPL, for example, to get a sense of trends by looking across communications of all the banks that we supervise, and trying to see if there's any accuracy in the trends that MPL tools report back on. But then, interestingly enough, now that I'm at essentially a Web3 company, I realized that I had been thinking of this in a very Web2 context. And going forward, we're going to have a lot of blockchain technologies that will have, even not by design, but just because of the technology's features, embedded supervision, simply because it'll be easier to track, who issued the tokens, what is underlying the token, and where is the token currently held in the financial system. So I think that is actually very exciting for regulators to see and monitor, if there have been blockchain technologies back during the subprime mortgage crisis, what could have been like if we've been able to monitor in real time where all those mortgage backed securities are held, and how are they correlated in real time to mortgages that were failing. So I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for giving us that kind of historical perspective as well. It's really, really helpful. So Cyril, what's your take?
Okay, thank you very much, Francesca. I would say, taking from the recent conference we had about 2 weeks ago, the submissions largely from that deliberation, it's very clear to me that collaboration is effective collaboration is something that, as an ecosystem, we cannot afford to toy with. It is really at the center of, delivering the goods as far as achieving the bigger picture and the bigger objective. Yes, the current outlook is still far from where the desired destination. There's a whole lot of fragmentation in terms of how the different players still go about their businesses, and this actually needs to be looked in from a very holistic perspective, right? Bringing in the different key players, the regulated, the regulator, all stakeholders, right, that have got a value. If I draw an analogy with what happened at the very beginning, early stage of the internet phase, right, where there was a complete, 360-degree view of the design of what the internet should look like, where you have different small pockets of networks, but interconnecting, as it were, together to achieve a bigger, objective, right? And that actually gave rise to, what we have today. So if you look at, in terms of the scale, in terms of the, the overall picture, bigger picture of what the internet has been able to achieve, enable people to do things in a better way, right? You will then begin to see the importance of collaboration, where we all need to move away from, our different pockets of silos, working in different, units, and trying to come together for a common purpose, right? Which is achieving a bigger objective. Because in that bigger objective, every party, has a role to play, and every party is also able to achieve their own individual objectives. Don't forget, right? We all have our interests, which is okay, but in achieving our own personal interests or organizational interests, right? I believe we can achieve that a lot better if the pie is bigger, right? And then is able to then address those needs, those ultimate needs. I will talk more about the purpose and the end needs of collaboration, because collaboration in itself is a means to an end, right? So let me stop here for now and allow others to have their shots. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyril. And yes, keep your powder dry, because one of the things I want to get onto next is, what's the purpose? What's the outcomes we're seeking to achieve through collaboration? But Angus, from your vantage point at the Bank of England, what's your sort of take on the state of collaboration in the ecosystem at the moment?
So, look, I run a big collaboration program. Collaboration is what we're all about. And in fact, if you want to collaborate with us, then nominations are currently open. You can go on our website, Transforming Data Collection, and submit a form now to come collaborate. So, I would say that it's been good. It was good as part of DOR, and I think it's getting better. I want to talk a bit more about what makes why do I think it's kind of good. And for us, the crucial thing is thinking about provision of basically a service, and the service that we're thinking about is a particular individual who's going to do some analysis. They might be a supervisor, policymaker, and they need some data to do their job. And there are a whole bunch of different parties and actors involved in delivering that service to that person. So in the case of data collection, there's some people in the bank who might be in data or in technology. Then there's firms, and there's a huge number of different actors within firms. And then ultimately, again, it goes back to people in the bank, and then ultimately into, the person who wants the information. And as Cyril was alluding to, at the moment, what you see is lots of silos in the provision of this different service. We don't understand how what we're doing in our little component, our little part of that service provision, impacts the other different parts of the supply chain who are also providing bits of that service. And I think that's really the beauty of collaboration. The beauty of the program that we have is getting all these people in the same room together, so we can understand, well, actually, the stuff that I'm doing over here when I'm designing the collection in Excel makes your life difficult as a firm for these reasons. And actually, if we tweak this slightly, then we can make this whole process work a lot better, and therefore ultimately the service we're delivering to our users, our data users, better as well.
Thank you very much, Angus. And can I just take a moment to commend our audience? I am loving the audience participation with the thumbs up, the heart emojis, the smiley faces. I'm very much enjoying this. Keep it coming. Alan, there you go. Look at that. Alan, last but not least, what's as someone in the chat put it, gamekeeper turned poacher, or the other way around. I never get it right. What's your perspective?
Yes, indeed. So I broadly agree with everything Linda, Cyril, and Angus have said, which is good. We're all on the same page when it comes to collaboration. I think, from my point of view, there's no gap in the quality of the people and the companies involved. I think way back from, you know, the 2016, 2015 birth of RegTech, more or less, and when we started looking at using these technologies to help transform the FCA handbook, you know, I was very keen to make sure that we did that, because the people involved in these companies were always highly skilled, highly motivated, and they continue to be so. So I think from the quality point of view, no gap at all there. The gap comes when we start asking people for their time and companies for their resources to actually start delivering this stuff. Everyone is super busy. They've all got far too much to do. The last thing they need, well, what should be a side project or side of the desk thing, is taking up far too much time already. And then they tend to either say, sorry, I've got to actually generate some revenue, or they move roles. You know, we also lose a lot of key collaborators that we work with because they change firms, they change position. That's also frustrating, given that the time it takes to deliver these projects. That's kind of inevitable. But I think Cyril made a good point about how the web started and how it came together. And this sort of reminded me that there's, you know, when it comes to technology, there's no penalty really for waiting. The technology will always get better. And if it doesn't quite fit this year, I'm going to wait a year and see if it fits next year. So that also tends to be a little bit frustrating, that you've got the right person, you've got the right use case, but they want to say, well, I want to see what your technology looks like in a year or so. That's frustrating. But I think to end on kind of like a more positive note, we can bridge these gaps. They are bridgeable. And as a startup, it's a must-do to collaborate. We have to do it, and we can collaborate with people like Sarah at ChangeGap, and they can help us bridge this by putting together the target operating models, the project management, the admin side of things. You know, some of this essential work that starts to be problematic when people don't have time to do it. So collaboration is essential in all elements of kind of delivering these things. And if we do it well and we all do it together, then I think we can resolve some of these problems.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And I think one of the things I just want to plant in the minds of you all as a panel is something you've just talked about, Alan, which is essentially around a misalignment of incentives, right? So, you know, when you know, push comes to shove and actually getting started in this sort of practical application of collaboration, you know, you've talked about kind of lack of resource, you know, time poor, how, you know, but you also touched on the phenomenal skill and talent that exists, and actually the benefit of utilizing that. And so how do we bring that to bear? One of the things I also want to talk about is, you know, you've all been very positive. Is anyone missing from the ecosystem? Is anyone not pulling their weight? Any parts of the sector that you would look at and say, okay, how is this all working out? So I won't put you on the spot now. I'll leave you to ponder on that one, and maybe we'll come back to it. But Cyril, if I can maybe perhaps pick up with you and then ask the panel to kind of come in with your reflections as well. You started to go into a conversation there about what are the outcomes we are seeking to achieve from collaboration? What's the purpose? We had a little bit there from Alan around kind of the talent, the skills, the ideation, the art of the possible. But what's your take on you know, what are the outcomes? And I think they'll be different for all of you. So don't be afraid to leap in and kind of chip into the discussion, fellow panel members.
Okay, so I think most importantly, the impact is key for me, right? The more strengthened in terms of collaboration with the ecosystem is, the impact of the outcomes will be more felt. And that will definitely translate into impact in terms of the customer outcomes, customer experiences, and all of that. It will translate to impact in terms of the market development. It will translate to impact in terms of the inclusiveness, right? Overall inclusiveness, and even in fairness, right? Fairness for all, which is where competition and all of that comes in, right? So this essentially looks at it from a very, very broad perspective, right? And if you take that a bit further down, if you break it further down, then you begin to then see that when we looked at, say, customer outcome, impact in terms of customer outcome, how does, at the end of the day, so again, like I said, collaboration is there to serve a purpose. And that purpose, which obviously will be driven by the impact, would have to translate into better standard of living, better ways of doing things, more business or more activities for the different stakeholders, right? For the customer, for instance, the customer wants to be sure that they are comfortable. They are comfortable being a part of the system. They are not shortchanged in any way. Their data is safe, right? When they take part in any form of transaction, and all of those kind of things. For the financial institutions, for instance, financial institutions want to be sure that they are more efficient and effective in the way they go about their businesses. The regulator want to be sure that they are even able to understand the data, right, to be able to make well-informed decisions. The regulators want to also be sure that they are not stifling innovation in such a way that does not even enable the markets move in the right direction, right? The solution providers want to be sure that their solutions are able to address the pain points, in the marketplace, right? And some of these things. So for me, it is that impact in terms of, the scale and in terms of the reach that really is at the center of the purpose for this collaboration. Thank you.
Who would like to chip in next? I'm not going to pick on anybody. Who wants to either pick up where Cyril left off, or introduce a different perspective?
Well, I could add a different perspective. At Center, we are a member consortium, and we not only develop standards for Center standard stablecoins, but also for the ecosystem more broadly. About 2-3 months ago, we released our latest standard on decentralized identity called Verity. And Verity is an open source standard. Anyone in industry is welcome to check it out on GitHub. And we are in the process of convening several working groups to help build out what we call the last mile problem, where you have to build out interoperable standards for the industry. Convening these working groups is work in itself, right? And finding people who are developers and have the time and interest. And thankfully, digital identity is a topic that people feel very passionately about. And ultimately, the work that our industry groups will end up producing will be a product that I hope will also help regulators in reducing fraud and illicit activities, and also be able to help them track when necessary, source of funds. So a lot of these products are, in the end, may have been developed for the consumer in mind, but will also be very helpful for regulators too.
Thank you. And Angus, as currently kind of in the regulatory space, and Alan as an ex-regulator, what's your take?
I think that, the most important thing, I think, is to make sure you have a clear goal and outcome you're looking to achieve with whenever you embark on a collaboration exercise. I think it's very easy to kind of get a bunch of people together who have got a vague idea of what you want to do together, and sit in a room and spend lots of time together talking about all your ideas, but you're not quite clear on what actually are you trying to achieve, and what's your plan for getting there, and how is your collaboration going to get there. And so for us, we summarize it in our mission statement, which is for the bank and the FCA to get the data they need at the lowest possible cost to industry. And that's kind of our guiding principle, and everything that we do has got to be about making that vision statement happen.
And I mean, Alan, if I can ask a kind of a slightly pointed, more specific question around this. I mean, your experience comes from the very kind of nascent days of the RegTech space and thinking about the importance of collaboration in that. And one of the things I think is around how you curate that collaboration for good outcomes. So who's in the room for those discussions, as Angus said, I think is really important, but also, who's not in the room, and how do you make sure that you have the breadth and diversity of perspective from the supply side, from the demand side, from academia even, to really get that richness. And I was wondering if you could offer any insights on lessons learnt, but around how to really curate that for to sort of achieve the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, not sure I've got all the answers to that, but we definitely did a very good job of that when we were in the early days of the tech sprints. And we got, exactly as you say, academics, vendors, firms, other regulators in the room, and that really helped. And I think probably the one thing you want to avoid is kind of like an innovation talking shop, right? So you do definitely need shared goals, and Angus is absolutely right from that point of view. And I think it's very easy to lose sight of that and say, and it just becomes like an innovation working group for the sake of it, and you don't want that. But you can still have the right people around the table, but they're just talking about the wrong thing. Whereas what they should be talking about is, why is business as usual so expensive? Why is it so slow? Why do we keep getting it wrong? As Angus says, there's firms spending $4 billion a year to send rubbish data to the Bank of England. This is not a good outcome. We are all clever people. We should be able to solve this quite easily. So I think the lesson for me is just to make sure that your focus is exactly as everyone has said, on the correct goal, rather than a kind of probably one that's a bit lower down and a bit easier to obtain.
Can I jump in on this?
Yeah, please do, Angus.
Because I think this is a really crucial question. I think there's two groups I would highlight. One is on the people who are the facilitators of these conversations, and they're absolutely critical. I think often we have all the people who understand the problems, who've got fantastic ideas about what the solution should be, but, and I think Linda alluded to this earlier, you need facilitators, people who are going to help organise all these people who are going to kind of manage the situation, people who are going to document what everyone's saying and make sure you create deliverables which are interesting and easy to comprehend, and people who are going to be able to design stuff. So they're going to, before you get into building expensive tech stacks, you need people who are going to draw things in a picture, so we can help take all of the ideas and the visions that we have in our heads and make them feel real. Because that's really, the first step before we start actually, I think, kind of building things or delivering things. The second other group, which is really important, who aren't necessarily involved in the collaboration itself, that I would highlight, are the both senior people within relevant organisations, and also typically the people who are not directly involved but will be impacted by the kind of things that you're talking about. And the first group is really important because unless you've got a mandate for change, you're going to struggle, quite frankly, to turn that collaboration into good outcomes. And the second group is really important, is because you can come up with the best new way of doing things, or the best kind of standards that you can possibly imagine, or some fantastic new tool. But typically, you're going to be impacting other people's lives, and unless you bring them on that journey, all of a sudden you're going to have a great solution or a great product, but then no one's actually going to want to use it. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that piece around how do you make sure that you're designing for the needs as they are rather than the needs that you anticipate. And I think that kind of that sort of user-centric thinking is really key. So thank you for bringing that in. any other reflections on anything that sort of Alan or Angus have brought, or can I sort of shift the conversation to, we've talked about kind of what makes for good collaboration, but are we seeing anything? Are we seeing the wrong types of collaboration? Is there such a thing? And I think we started to hear a little bit about a balance of talking versus action, and how do we move from great conversations, everybody really alive and engaged, to kind of how do you execute? How do you really think through what does it look like? What will it feel like? What's the value it will bring? So can I kind of maybe come to you, Linda, and think about, with your varying perspectives that you've got and varying seats at the table you've had, if you can touch on where you draw the line potentially between talking and doing, quality versus quantity of collaboration, things around diversity of thought and perspective in the room, the sustainability of solutions and effectiveness of application, which I think Angus was touching on. What's your sense of kind of that balance around good quality versus maybe the wrong types of collaboration?
Well, I'm wondering if it's because I'm actually sitting at the BIS headquarters today. I'm particularly focused on collaboration between central banks, and also collaboration between regulators and regulators with industry. And I think I'm probably an example of collaboration right now between central banks, regulators, and industry, as someone who's been invited to time with them this week. So I think that's an example, a positive example. But you asked me for a negative scenario, and I think one is when, as Angus mentioned earlier, a working group that doesn't have a very clear objective and scope. So you always need a good scoping document if you have official, working groups, and then a very specific deliverable with a timeline. When you don't have a specified deliverable, then it is difficult for collaborations to reach a common destination. So that I think is incredibly important to spell out what it is that, whether it's just a survey report to specific technical standards, building out the code for specific features, that all has to be specified in the beginning in a scoping document. Otherwise, I think, and this is again very probably BIS centric, you end up with working groups that just never die, and they just live on forever. And I, as a secretariat member, I was always very proud if I was able to wrap up a working group and close it out. I thought that was a sign of good governance. So governance, I think, in the end, is a very important key feature that often gets forgotten. It's really important for well-functioning collaboration.
Thank you, Linda. And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? And I think it's also about one thing we haven't explicitly touched on is around the tools for collaboration. What enables collaboration? Angus, Alan, you've both been up close to the tech sprint model, which is a very, very well known and widely utilized tool for collaboration, but there have been critics of it only goes so far, and actually how does it what are the off ramps and the next steps for a tech sprint model. But I think thinking if what are your reflections, Alan, Angus, Cyril, on and on kind of talking and doing, how that balance in kind of enabling good collaboration, and sort of maybe touching on sort of what your observations on sort of good tools for collaboration. Who wants to leap in?
Okay, maybe I should just start. So it's more about what does a good collaboration look like, right? Essentially, and from our perspective, I think it again really boils down to one thing: how sincere is that purpose? Sincerity of purpose, right? Which touches again on defining your goal, the right goal, right? And then have a proper structure or framework in achieving the implementation of those goals set out, right? At the heart of this, also we have a key element of trust, partnership, and healthy competition, right? So, I mean, I'll give specific examples, right, of key projects in Nigeria, the central bank and the industry. One is around the payment switch, right, the instant payment facility, and the agent banking network, right? Now, these two projects had the entire ecosystem from the design phase of it involved, right? There were different committees that were set up to address specific areas, different aspects of the entire project. And there were guidelines that were drawn from the very beginning with the interest of every stakeholder, well addressed, well, taken care of. And these were constantly reviewed and all of that. At the end of the day, the banks knew their role, the solution providers knew their role, this payment switch knew its role, and the central bank, the regulator, also knew their own role as well. And the result was magic. Within the defined or agreed timelines, the projects went live and traction from the very beginning. And that's the success of those two projects were pretty much driven from that, because the entire stakeholders, took ownership, right, of the entire thing. Everyone knew what to do, and it was just, on autopilot. Now, when I compare that to another project on mobile payments, still in Nigeria, where at the time the regulators came up with a model which was bank-led model. So that was a model where the banks were at the forefront of that initiative, right? The telcos were pretty much made to take the passenger seats, right? Obviously, because of course the banks were also scared of losing out, as it were. So they were not really in the mainstream. 7 years down the line, after the project, the mobile money operators were licensed, there was little or no traction, right? At least not to the extent that was envisaged. Which now led the regulator to then take a second look at the initiative, right, and had to license the payment service banks, and later on now licensing the telcos, right, to play that role, right. So yeah, it took more than 7 years to get the telcos to be somehow integrated in the process. But the point is, because some parties within the ecosystem were not given a sense of ownership, and they're not given a sense of belonging, so to speak, right? And there were a bit of, even among the financial institutions, there were some financial institutions that were given licenses, right, as playing the lead roles, while some other financial institutions were not. So obviously that model didn't work, right? So this clearly shows what you can achieve when you have, the key elements of, trust, partnership, and healthy competition, together to drive a common collaborative goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyril. I want to come to a couple of questions. I'm very conscious of time, and I want to come to a couple of questions that we've had in the chat. One is very specifically at Alan, so I will let him read it before I put him on the spot with that question. But the other is around the extent of international collaboration between regulators. And the question is, are we seeing a sort of zenith? Are we at the high point, or is there a trend of deglobalization, and is the trend of deglobalization and localization of supply chains impacting the extent of collaboration? Does anyone have any reflections or responses to that?
Shall I give it a quick one from a bank perspective?
Yeah.
So I think post-financial crisis, there was a massive outburst of collaboration between regulators, and I think everyone kind of needed. It was a global crisis. We needed global solutions. My sense is that a lot of that sort of post-financial crisis critical reform work is being done. And I think there's a different movement, which is actually increasing collaboration from a different set of parties. People like myself who are more interested not just in changing the kind of the level of financial regulation and the quality of financial regulation. It's almost about the way that we do regulation and making that more efficient. And I think that's a big growth area in terms of collaboration. And obviously, you know, Francesca, you're almost kind of a point in case in point for that trend.
Indeed. Linda, kind of from your very physical seat in the BIS Tower in Basel, any reflections on that?
Well, Francesca, you know this much better than I.
But I'm the moderator, so I can dole out the questions today.
I'm about to say whatever Francesca thinks. That's it. Well, I just took my first tour of the Innovation Hub yesterday, and I was floored. I remember it was a floor full of offices with doors that were probably kept shut most of the time. And now it's just an open floor plan, including cushions on the floor for people to just plop down and hang out, right? And I just assumed, oh, this is just another part of the BIS that's probably focused on policy or research. And they explained to me, no, actually, we work with industry and on technology, and they're trying to develop, technological products for central bankers. I just was, I thought I'd been following what the Innovation Hub was doing, but I didn't realize that the Innovation Hub was actually a kind of a startup, right? And so the collaboration that happens there is leading to real products, and it's not just with regulators. It's with regulatory needs in mind, but trying to develop real world solutions utilizing new technologies. So that is something I learned this week that I'm now sharing with you all.
Yes, you're absolutely right. If you're from the BIS vantage point, I think the trend is only ever upwards in terms of the collaboration we're seeking to achieve. Alan, I'm going to kind of let you off the hook on that one, but maybe you might put your response in the chat, because we have come to time, and I want to, before we wrap, thank you all very much for your engagement, your reflections, your generosity in sharing your wisdom with me and with our audience today. It has been hugely valuable, judging just by the kind of number and breadth of emoticons that I've seen flowing across my screen. It has been hugely welcomed by our audience as well. So thank you very much indeed. And Sarah, if I can hand to you.
Yeah, thank you, and really nothing more to say, because you've said such amazing things, and I'm just really humbled actually by the commitment of you guys who've just got amazing experience and relevance and perspective to this. that you've given time that you don't have, to this. So I think, we've heard great things, and just by you being here, and I know each one of you to varying degrees, but I know you're totally committed to collaboration. So I'm really excited to see things moving on. We can get sort of down about the things needing to be done, but I think there's definitely some great things we've got, to look forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.